Ghost Valley, 1878, a place where even seasoned frontiersmen feared to tread. The harsh landscape of jutting rocks and barren plains had claimed countless lives, earning its ominous name. Amidst this desolation, Elizabeth Harmon clutched her wounded side, watching her 3 exhausted children huddle beneath a shallow overhang. 4 days since the attack. 4 days since she'd buried her husband with bare hands. The water was gone, hope fading. In the distance, dust rose from approaching riders, the same men who had left them for dead. Then, from the shadows, a silent figure appeared, an Apache warrior, his dark eyes assessing their plight. Enemy by birth, savior by choice. Could a woman raised on stories of savage natives trust this man with her children's lives? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elizabeth Harmon traced her fingers over the silver locket at her throat, the only remnant of a life that now seemed a distant dream. Inside, James smiled back at her, forever frozen in happier times. The worn family Bible lay beside her, its pages smudged with the desert dust that coated everything in this forsaken place. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Sarah whimpered, her 5-year-old face pinched with discomfort. "I know, darling, we all are." Elizabeth smoothed her youngest daughter's tangled blonde curls, forcing a reassuring smile she didn't feel. The wound in her side throbbed mercilessly, each heartbeat sending fresh waves of pain through her body. William, 12 and trying desperately to fill his father's shoes, scanned the horizon with eyes too old for his boyish face. "Those riders are getting closer," he reported, jaw clenched tight. "We should move." "We can't outrun horses, Will," 9-year-old Emma said softly, ever the practical one. She sat cross-legged, methodically sorting through their meager remaining possessions. Only 4 months ago, they had been a respectable Boston family. James, once a successful merchant, had lost everything in the financial panic. The land deed to an Arizona Territory homestead had been their last hope, a chance to rebuild far from whispers and pitying glances. A fresh start, James had promised, his eyes alight with possibility as he spread the property maps across their dining table. "Ghost Valley may sound ominous, but the agent assured me the soil is rich and the water plentiful." The journey west had been arduous, but filled with cautious optimism. Elizabeth remembered how the children had pestered their father with endless questions about their new life. Would they have horses? Would they see real Indians? James had answered each inquiry with patience and enthusiasm. "The natives stay on their reservations now," he'd assured them, "and those who don't keep to themselves in the mountains will have no trouble if we mind our business." How terribly wrong he had been. The attack came at dawn, 6 days ago, a band of white outlaws, not the savage Indians they'd been warned about. They'd taken everything of value, killed James when he resisted, and left the rest of them to die slowly in the wilderness. Elizabeth had buried her husband with bare hands, the children helping to pile rocks over his shallow grave. Then she'd gathered her stunned children and what little the raiders had overlooked, determined to reach the settlement marked on their map. But the wound in her side, a deep slash from an outlaw's knife when she'd fought to protect Emma, had slowed them considerably. Infection had set in. Each step became torture, each hour a battle against encroaching weakness. "Will, come sit down," Elizabeth called, noticing how her son's shoulders trembled with exhaustion despite his stoic expression. "Save your strength." The boy reluctantly obeyed, sliding down beside his sisters under the rocky overhang that provided their only shelter. "Are we going to die here, Mama?" Emma asked, her voice calm and analytical even as her eyes betrayed her fear. Elizabeth reached for her middle child's hand. "No, sweetheart. We just need someone's coming." William scrambled to his feet, placing himself between his family and the approaching figure. Elizabeth's heart hammered against her ribs. Not the outlaws, not yet. This was a solitary figure, moving with the fluid grace of someone perfectly at home in this harsh landscape. An Apache warrior. Elizabeth had heard stories all her life. tales of scalping and torture, of settlers found mutilated beyond recognition. She pulled Sarah against her chest, ignoring the searing pain from her wound. The warrior stopped several yards away, his dark eyes taking in their desperate situation. He wore buckskin leggings and a cotton shirt, a knife at his belt and a bow slung across his back. His long black hair was tied with a leather thong, his face weathered by sun and wind. To Elizabeth's surprise, he made no threatening moves. Instead, he slowly raised his empty hands, palms forward. "White woman hurt," he said in accented English, gesturing toward her blood-stained dress. "Bad men come back soon. You come with Nakohi now, or you die here." Nakohi had tracked the white men for 3 days. His fingers unconsciously touched the carved stone talisman hanging from his neck, the last gift from his father, who had taught him to read the desert like others read books. The outlaw's trail was clear: scattered campfires, discarded whiskey bottles, and the occasional blood spatter telling a story of violence. He hadn't expected survivors. Crouching on the ridge, he'd studied the woman and her children for nearly an hour before approaching. The oldest boy, protective, wary, exhausted. The middle girl, observant, thoughtful. The little one frightened, but resilient, and the mother, wounded, feverish, but with eyes that still held determination. Nakohi knew he should leave them. His people had suffered enough at the hands of white settlers. The cavalry's betrayal of his band still burned like fire in his memory, his wife and son among those slaughtered, despite promises of safe passage. For 3 years, he had lived alone in these mountains, a ghost among his ancestral lands, yet something in the children's faces pulled at him, and the woman's stubborn fight to keep them alive despite her wound spoke of a courage he respected. Now, as he stood before them, he saw fear replace hope in their eyes. "We don't need your help," the boy said, his voice breaking. He brandished a small pocket knife, a gesture so futile that Nakohi almost smiled. "William," the woman cautioned, struggling to sit upright. Her face was flushed with fever, her dress crusted with dried blood. "Please, we mean no harm." Nakohi pointed toward the horizon. "Bad men, 6 riders, coming back." He held up fingers. 2 hours, maybe less. The woman's eyes widened. She clutched the smallest child closer. "How do we know you won't hurt us?" the boy demanded. Nakohi met his gaze steadily. "If Nakohi won't hurt, already done." He pointed to the woman's side. "You die soon without medicine. Children die without water." The older girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, I think we should trust him. We have no water left." The woman studied Nakohi's face, searching for something. Finally, she nodded. "My name is Elizabeth Harmon. These are my children, William, Emma, and Sarah." Nakohi knelt slowly, reaching for his water skin. He offered it first to the smallest child, who shrank back until her mother nodded permission. The girl drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. "Medicine first," Nakohi said, gesturing to Elizabeth's wound. "Then we go." Despite William's suspicious glare, Nakohi opened a small pouch at his waist, removing crushed herbs mixed with bear fat. Elizabeth winced as he gently pulled back the blood-soaked fabric of her dress. "Bad cut. Deep." He worked efficiently, applying the poultice and binding it with a strip of clean buckskin. This helped with fever, stopped bad spirits in blood. Elizabeth's eyes fluttered as the immediate relief of the medicine registered. "Thank you," she whispered. The middle girl, Emma, watched closely. "What kind of plants did you use?" she asked. Nakohi glanced at her, surprised by the question. "Desert sage, juniper, old medicine. I've read about native remedies," she said. "In my father's books." William snorted. "Books that also said they'd scalp us first chance they got." Nakohi ignored the boy's hostility, gathering the few useful items scattered around their makeshift camp. "Need move now. Carry only what needed." Elizabeth tried to stand, but stumbled, her face contorting in pain. Without hesitation, Nakohi supported her weight. "I can walk," she insisted, though her legs trembled beneath her. "For a little while," Nakohi agreed. "Then I carry. No shame in help when needed." William stepped forward. "I'll help my mother." Nakohi nodded, acknowledging the boy's pride. "You watch, little one. I take things we need." He paused, looking each of them in the eye. "Path hard, must be quiet, must be quick." As he helped organize their departure, Nakohi felt the stone talisman warm against his chest. His grandfather had once told him that the spirits sometimes placed people in your path for a reason. Looking at the determined faces of these children and their wounded mother, he wondered what purpose they might serve in his solitary existence. The distant sound of hoofbeats made the decision urgent. Elizabeth Harmon looked toward the sound, then back to Nakohi, fear and resolve mingling in her eyes. "Lead the way," she said softly. Elizabeth's fingers closed around James's pocket watch, its glass face cracked from the attack, hands frozen at 6:47, the moment her husband had died defending them. She tucked it into her skirt pocket as Nakohi motioned for them to move. "Stay low," he instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Follow path through rocks." William helped Emma gather their remaining possessions, while Elizabeth lifted Sarah, wincing as pain shot through her side. "I carry small one," Nakohi said, approaching cautiously. Sarah buried her face in Elizabeth's shoulder. "No, Mama." "Sarah, please," Elizabeth murmured. "Mama's hurt and can't carry you far." Nakohi knelt to the child's level. "Nakohi strong like horse. Sarah ride on back, quiet as mouse." The little girl peered at him from behind her mother's arm. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. As they began their journey, Elizabeth marveled at how silently Nakohi moved. Despite carrying Sarah, William stayed close to his mother, one hand ready to support her when the terrain grew difficult. Emma followed, observing everything with quiet intensity. "What's that plant?" she asked, pointing to a small flowering shrub. "Desert marigold," Nakohi replied. "Good for bee stings. And that one? Mesquite. Seeds make flour. Sap heal wounds." William rolled his eyes. "We don't need a botany lesson." Emma glared at her brother. "Maybe we do. What if we need to find food?" "Your sister smart," Nakohi said. "Knowledge mean life in desert." They traveled until midday when the sun's heat became unbearable. Nakohi led them to a shallow cave where shadow offered respite. "Rest now," he said, gently setting Sarah down. "Night better for travel." Elizabeth sank gratefully to the ground. The herbal poultice had dulled her pain, but exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. She watched as Nako produced a small water skin, carefully measuring a portion for each of them. "So little," William observed. "Is enough," Nako replied. "Next water half-day walk." Sarah, who had remained silent throughout their journey, suddenly spoke. "I'm hungry." Nako reached into a small pouch and removed what appeared to be dried meat and some kind of seed cake. He offered it to Sarah first. "What is it?" Elizabeth asked warily. "Pemmican, deer meat, berries, fat. Strong food. Last long time." Elizabeth nodded permission and Sarah took a small bite, her expression brightening. "It's good, Mama." As they ate, Emma continued her questions, each answered with surprising patience. William maintained his distance, but listened intently. "How do you know these men are coming back?" Elizabeth finally asked. Nakohi's expression darkened. "Macready leaves no witnesses. Has reputation. You know of him?" He nodded. 3 summers passed. He killed trading post family. Only child escape." He paused. "I find boy wandering. Take to mission." Elizabeth studied him. "You were an army scout, weren't you?" "You're English." 5 years with Bluecoats," he confirmed. "Before they break treaty. Before they kill my family." The cave fell silent except for Sarah's soft breathing as she dozed against Emma's shoulder. "I'm sorry," Elizabeth said finally. Nako met her gaze. "You lose husband. I lose wife, son. Past is past. William, who had been examining James's broken watch, looked up. "If you hate white people, why help us? Hate brings nothing good," Narco replied. "Your children innocent, your husband dead protecting family. Honorable." As evening approached, they prepared to continue their journey. Narco fashioned a sling for Sarah from a spare cloth, securing her to his back. "Where are you taking us?" Elizabeth asked. "Place of healing waters, 2 days' walk, safe from Macready." And then, Narco's eyes held hers. "Then you decide, go to white settlement or," he hesitated, "or what? Or I take you south, Mexican villages. People there not care if Apache or white." The implications hung in the air between them. Elizabeth felt a strange flutter in her chest. Not fear, but something she couldn't name. As they emerged from the cave into the cooling twilight, William fell into step beside Narco. "Will you teach me how to track?" he asked quietly. "And how to find water?" The corner of Narco's mouth lifted slightly. "Yes, good skills for man to know." Elizabeth watched her son's shoulders straighten at being called a man. For the first time since James's death, a flicker of hope warmed her heart. Perhaps they might survive this wilderness after all. Jedediah Macready unfolded the tattered wanted poster, his weathered fingers tracing the crude likeness of his own face. $5,000, dead or alive, a fortune to some men. A joke to him. "Boss, they ain't here," Dawson called, kicking at the remnants of the shallow grave they'd discovered. "Just the husband, like we left him." Macready spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the desert floor. Woman was gutshot, couldn't have gone far. His cold blue eyes scanned the horizon. Something wasn't right. The woman and her brats should have been easy to find, dead or dying in this wasteland. "Tracks here." Riley, their Comanchero tracker, called from a nearby ridge. "Woman, 3 children." He paused, examining the ground more carefully. "And something else. Apache, I think." Heading northeast, Macready's face darkened. "Apache, you sure?" Riley nodded, pointing to distinctive marks in the sand. "Moccasin prints. Way he walks, heel barely touches ground." "Apache for sure." "Damn savages," muttered Simmons, the youngest of their gang. "Probably took the woman and kids for slaves." "Or worse," Dawson added with a leer. Macready stared at the distant mountains. He'd tangled with Apaches before, and still bore the scars across his back. "Don't matter what they want with them. Can't have witnesses." He folded the wanted poster and tucked it into his vest pocket. "Especially that boy. Got a good look at all our faces. Why not just let the Apache have 'em?" Simmons suggested. "Saves us the trouble." Macready's hand shot out, grabbing the younger man by the throat. "Because I don't leave loose ends, ever." He released Simmons with a shove. "That's how I've stayed alive this long." "Mount up," he ordered. "Riley, you take point. I want those bodies all of." Miles away, Narco froze mid-stride, head tilted slightly as if listening to something only he could hear. "What is it?" Elizabeth whispered, instinctively pulling Sarah closer. "Horses, many, coming fast." William's eyes widened. "The men who killed Pa." Narco Feed nodded grimly. "We must move quicker." He gestured toward a rocky incline. "Up there, hard to follow with horses." Elizabeth's wound had improved, thanks to Narco Feed's medicine, but climbing steep terrain still left her breathless and dizzy. William stayed at her side, supporting her elbow when she faltered. Emma, ever observant, noticed Narco Feed's concern. "They won't stop looking for us, will they?" "No," he answered honestly. "Macready, dangerous man. Very stubborn." "You know him?" Elizabeth asked between labored breaths. Narco Feed touched a thin scar that ran from his temple to jaw. "Once, when I scout for army, he trade guns to Comanche, blame Apache. They reached a small plateau where a stunted juniper provided meager shade. Narco Feed helped Elizabeth sit, then climbed higher to survey their back trail. What he saw made his expression grim. 6 riders. Good tracker with them." He pointed to another distant dust cloud. "More trouble there." Elizabeth squinted at the horizon. "More outlaws, bluecoats, cavalry." William stood straighter. Soldiers. That's good. They'll help us. Nakofi's face remained impassive. Not good for Apache, not good for anyone with Macready's men between. Surely the army would protect us, Elizabeth said, though uncertainty crept into her voice. Maybe, maybe not. Nakofi's eyes held a distant pain. Captain Hargrove lead that patrol. He promised my people safe passage. Then opened fire on women, children. The implications sank in slowly. Elizabeth remembered newspaper accounts of necessary pacification of hostile tribes. How many of those stories had twisted truth like this? So we're trapped between outlaws and soldiers who might not help us, she asked. Nakohe nodded once. We must reach healing waters before either find us. He knelt beside William, drawing a rough map in the dust. We here, water here. He pointed to a faint line etched into the rock. Old Apache trail, hard to follow unless you know. The boy studied the crude map intensely. Can I help? I'm good at remembering paths. Yes. You watch for snake stone. Nakohe pointed to a distinctive white rock, shaped vaguely like a serpent's head. Trail markers. Elizabeth watched the exchange with mixed emotions. Her son needed a father figure now, more than ever. But to find it in an Apache warrior, what would James think? Yet as Nakohe patiently showed William how to identify safe plants and watch for trail signs, she couldn't deny the man's genuine concern for her children. We go now, Nakohe finally said, helping Elizabeth to her feet. Stay on rock when possible, leave no tracks. As they descended the opposite side of the ridge, Sarah reached for Nakohe's hand without hesitation. The warrior's normally stoic expression softened momentarily, and he adjusted his stride to match her small steps. Behind them, two dust clouds slowly converged. Dawn broke with copper light spilling across the desert floor. They had traveled through most of the night, stopping only when Sarah could no longer keep her eyes open. Now, huddled beneath an overhanging rock shelf, Nakohe worked silently, his hands moving with practiced precision. William watched intently as the Apache shaped a small piece of wood with a larger stone, then attached a carefully worked piece of metal to one end. "What are you making?" the boy finally asked. Nakohe held up the finished product, a small knife with a crude but effective wooden handle. "For you," he said, offering it handle first. "Every man needs good knife." William's eyes widened as he accepted the gift. "Thank you," he whispered, turning the blade carefully. "Where did you get the metal?" "Belt buckle from your father's grave," Nakohe said solemnly. "Good steel, he helped protect you, still." Elizabeth, who had been dozing with her daughters, opened her eyes at this exchange. Something tightened in her throat as she watched her son reverently test the edge of his new knife with his thumb. "Now," Nakohe continued, "learn to use." He pointed to a dried yucca stalk. "Cut top, not bottom. Save bottom for water." For the next hour, Nakohe taught William basic survival skills, how to find water trapped in certain plants, how to identify tracks of animals that always stayed near water sources, how to cut branches for shelter without leaving obvious signs of human presence. Elizabeth noticed Emma watching just as intently, absorbing every word. Even little Sarah had awakened and sat cross-legged beside her sister, uncharacteristically quiet. "Your fever return," Nakohe said suddenly, turning to Elizabeth. "Medicine wearing thin." Elizabeth pressed a hand to her forehead, surprised to find it damp with sweat despite the morning chill. "I'm fine," she insisted, though the familiar lightness in her head had returned. Nakohe frowned. "Not fine," warned angry again. He approached, kneeling beside her. "Must see." Elizabeth hesitated, glancing at her children. Nakohe understood her modesty. "William," he called, "take sisters to find snake stone on ridge. Practice tracking." The boy stood taller with his new responsibility. "How far should we go?" "See ridge but not beyond. Stay in calling distance." Once the children were occupied, Nakohe gently helped Elizabeth lean forward to examine her wound. His touch was clinical, impersonal, yet Elizabeth felt her cheeks warm. "Infection fighting back," he pronounced. Need stronger medicine. We'll find it next water. How far? Elizabeth asked, wincing as he reapplied the remaining poultice. Half day. Maybe more. His dark eyes met hers. Can you walk? Elizabeth nodded, though uncertainty must have shown on her face. Naka, he studied her for a moment, then reached a decision. I carry you part way. Save strength. No, I can't ask that of you. Not asking, he interrupted. Need reach water by dark. Children need you strong. Before she could protest further, a commotion from the ridge caught their attention. William appeared, running down the slope with his sisters close behind. Men coming, he gasped. On horses. Naka was instantly alert. How many? How far? 4, I think. Maybe a mile back, following the canyon. You see good. Naka praised, quickly gathering their few possessions. Now we move fast. Different way. Elizabeth struggled to her feet, alarmed by how weak her legs felt. Naka noticed immediately. William, he instructed. Lead sisters. Follow that game trail. He pointed to a nearly invisible path among the rocks. I carry your mother. To Elizabeth's surprise, William didn't argue. Instead, he nodded solemnly, taking Sarah's hand. Come on, Em. We need to hurry. Before Elizabeth could protest, Naka had lifted her into his arms. She expected to feel vulnerable, afraid. Instead, a strange sense of security enveloped her as she felt the strength in his arms. I'm sorry, she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. No sorry for being human, he replied simply. They traveled in tense silence, Neko carrying Elizabeth while William led his sisters along the twisting game trail. The boy regularly looked back for guidance, and Neko would nod or gesture with his chin to indicate direction. After what seemed like hours, Sarah's small voice broke the silence. Mr. Neko, she said, the first time she had directly addressed him, will those bad men find us? Neko considered the child's question with the seriousness it deserved. Hard to say, little one. They're good at tracking, but you're better, right? Her blue eyes looked up at him with complete trust. Something shifted in Neko's expression, a softening that Elizabeth hadn't seen before. Neko, try very hard, he promised solemnly. For brave girl like you. Sarah smiled then, the first genuine smile since her father's death. By midday, Elizabeth's fever had worsened. Her thoughts became disjointed, memories blending with present reality. Sometimes she thought James was carrying her. Other times she believed she was back in Boston, walking through the public garden with her children. Water close, she heard Neko say, his voice seeming to come from far away. Hold strong, Elizabeth. It was the first time he had spoken her name. Somehow that small intimacy gave her strength to hold on to consciousness a little longer. William pulled the torn map from his pocket, squinting at its faded lines and incomplete borders. James had purchased it from the land agent in Syria, a document that had promised fertile valleys and abundant water. Now its inadequacies were painfully clear. Map wrong, Neko said, glancing at the paper as he gathered firewood. White men draw what they wish to see, not what it. They had reached the healing waters, Neko promised, a small spring bubbling from rock, surrounded by surprising greenery. For 2 days Elizabeth had drifted between fever dreams and moments of clarity, while Neko treated her wound with fresh herbs and mineral-rich mud from the spring. Today her fever had finally broken. We are here, Neko said, placing a small stone on the dusty ground beside their small fire. He arranged several more stones in a pattern. Mountains, canyon, river. He looked up at William. Your map shows none of these. Emma studied the impromptu geography lesson. Where are the settlements? The towns. Here. 2 days' walk. Neko placed another stone far from their position. But now we go different way. Elizabeth, sitting up for the first time in frowned. Why not head to the settlement? Surely there's a doctor. McCready has friends there. Neko interrupted. Small place. Everyone know everyone. Strangers noticed. So where are we going? William asked. Neko's expression grew serious. Dangerous path. Territory where Apache, Navajo, White men all claim land, no one truly control. Elizabeth tensed. Is there no safer route? Safer from McCready, not safer from others. Nekoya met her gaze directly. Must trust Nekoya. A week ago, the idea of trusting her family's lives to an Apache warrior would have seemed ludicrous to Elizabeth. Now, watching how gently he changed Sarah's scraped knee dressing, how patiently he taught William to set rabbit snares, how respectfully he maintained her modesty while treating her wound, trust had already taken root. "We trust you," she said softly. Something flickered in Nekoya's dark eyes, surprise, perhaps gratitude. He nodded once, then returned to the makeshift map. "We leave at dawn, take only what needed." That evening, William returned from checking his snares with a small desert hare. His face glowed with pride as he presented it to Nekoya. "I did it, just like you showed me." Nekoya nodded approvingly. "Good catch. Clean, quick kill. No suffering." Elizabeth watched as her son beamed under the praise. How different from the bitter, frightened boy of a week ago. Nekoya showed William how to properly dress the rabbit, wasting nothing. Soon the meat sizzled over their small fire, its rich aroma making Sarah dance with impatience. "When do we eat?" "I'm starving." "Patience, little one," Nekoya said, his normally stern face softening. "Good things come to those who wait." Emma, who had been collecting plants under Nekoya's guidance, added some desert onions to the cooking meat. "Is this right?" she asked, mimicking his earlier instructions. "Perfect," he confirmed. "You have good memory for plants." As they ate, Elizabeth found herself studying Nekoya's profile against the firelight. His features were sharply defined, high cheekbones, straight nose, strong jaw, not handsome in the way James had been, with his fair hair and laughing blue eyes, but compelling in a completely different way. He must have sensed her gaze, for he turned suddenly, catching her eyes with his. Instead of looking away, Elizabeth smiled tentatively. To her surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly in return. Later, as the children slept, Elizabeth joined Nekoya at the edge of their small camp. "Thank you," she said simply, "for my life. For my children." Nekoya stared into the darkness. "No need for thanks. Any man with honor would help." "Not any man," Elizabeth countered softly. "The men who killed James and left us to die were white men, not Apaches." A long silence followed. Finally, Nekoya spoke. "Good and bad in all people. White, Apache, Mexican." He glanced at her. "Judge by heart, not skin." The wisdom in his words struck Elizabeth deeply. How different from the warnings and prejudices she'd been raised with. "Tomorrow's journey," he continued. "Cross flash flood area. Dangerous if rain comes." Elizabeth looked up at the clear, star-filled sky. "But there's not a cloud in sight. Desert weather change quick, like life." His voice took on a distant quality. "Yesterday, you have husband home. Today, different path." The simple truth of his observation brought a lump to Elizabeth's throat. "We should rest," she said, suddenly aware of their solitude, of the strange intimacy of the night. Nekoya nodded, but as Elizabeth turned to go, his hand lightly touched her arm. The first time he had initiated contact that wasn't about survival or medicine. "You stronger than you know," he said quietly. "Children lucky to have such mother." The unexpected compliment warmed Elizabeth more than the fire had. As she settled beside her sleeping children, she realized that somewhere between Boston and this wilderness, she had begun to change in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across their sheltered camp. For the first time in days, they felt relatively safe. Hidden in a small canyon, whose entrance Nekoya had carefully disguised with brush and stones. Sarah watched, fascinated, as Nekoya's strong fingers worked the reddish clay he had collected from the streambed. Between his hands, small shapes emerged. A rabbit, a turtle, a bird with outstretched wings. "How do you make them so real?" she asked, leaning closer. Nekoya smiled slightly. "Clay remembers what it was before it is clay. I just help it remember." He placed the finished figurines near the fire to harden, then shaped another, a small horse with flowing mane. "This one for you," he told Sarah, placing it in her tiny palm. "For brave girl who walks far without complaint," Sarah beamed, cradling the gift carefully. "Can you tell us a story about horses?" William, who had been sharpening his small knife on a stone as Nakahe had taught him, looked up with interest. Even Emma set aside the plant specimens she had been arranging. Elizabeth, mending a tear in Emma's dress, smiled at her children's eager faces. In the past days they had traveled through harsh terrain, crossed a dry riverbed that Nakahe warned could flood with little notice, and hidden twice from distant riders. Yet somehow her children seemed more alive than they had been during their last months in Boston. Nakahe considered Sarah's request, then nodded. "I tell story my grandfather told me," he settled cross-legged by the fire. "Story of how first horse came to Apache people." The children gathered closer as Nakahe began to speak, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality that made the English words sound like poetry. "Long ago, before Apache rode horses, there was a great warrior named Stalking Wolf. One day, hunting in mountains, he found strange tracks. Not deer, not elk, something new. He followed tracks for 3 days until he saw a beautiful creature drinking from lake, strong, fast, with flowing mane like water." Sarah's eyes widened. "A horse?" Nakahe nodded, continuing the tale of how Stalking Wolf befriended the magical creature, how it taught him its language, and how together they brought horses to all Apache bands. His hands moved expressively as he spoke, occasionally adding sound effects that made Sarah giggle. When the story ended, Emma asked thoughtfully, "Is that how horses really came to your people?" "Story truth different from fact truth," Nakahe explained, "but both important." "My father told stories too," William said, unexpectedly, "about knights and dragons and faraway places." Elizabeth's hands stilled at the mention of James. It was the first time William had spoken of his father, without anger or grief clouding his voice. "Your father good storyteller?" Nakahe asked gently. William nodded. "The best. He'd make different voices for each character. Then he lives still, in stories you remember," Nakahe said. "This is how ancestors stay with us." Elizabeth felt tears prick her eyes at the simple wisdom in his words. "What about you, Mama?" Emma asked. "Tell us about Boston." Elizabeth hesitated, then began describing the public garden in spring, the swan boats gliding across the pond, the colorful tulips that lined the pathways. She told them about concerts on the common, about bookshops with towering shelves, about the harbor filled with ships from distant ports. "You miss this place?" Nakahe asked when she paused. "Parts of it," Elizabeth admitted. "The libraries, the music, the changing seasons." She looked around at the stark beauty of their surroundings. "But there's something honest about this land. It doesn't pretend to be gentle when it isn't," like Nakahe, Sarah declared with a child's directness. The unexpected comparison startled a laugh from Elizabeth. Nakahe's eyes crinkled at the corners, the closest he came to laughing. "Little one sees clearly," he said, adding another stick to the fire. As the night deepened, the children eventually drifted to sleep, Sarah clutching her clay horse. Elizabeth and Nakahe remained by the fire, comfortable in shared silence. "You were married long?" he finally asked, his voice low to avoid waking the children. 13 years, Elizabeth replied, surprised by the personal question. "And you?" 7 summers. Son was 5 winters when... He didn't finish, but Elizabeth understood. "What was her name?" she asked softly. "Morning Sky." His expression softened with memory, always smiling, even in hard times. "She sounds lovely." "She was." He poked at the embers. "Your husband, he was good man?" Elizabeth nodded. "Kind, funny, not always practical, but he believed in people, in possibilities." She sighed. "He thought coming west would give our children more opportunities." "Not wrong," Nakahe observed. "William learned to be man here. Emma learned medicine plants." Even little Sarah grows stronger each day. Elizabeth considered this perspective. I hadn't thought of it that way. In the distance, a coyote called, its plaintive cry echoing through the canyon. Another answered from farther away. They sing to remember they not alone, Nako, he said, listening to the wild chorus. Elizabeth looked across the fire at this man who had saved them, taught them, protected them, a man society had taught her to fear. None of us are alone anymore, she said quietly. Nakohi's eyes met hers over the dying fire, holding a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. The trading post appeared like a mirage on the horizon, a low adobe structure with a wooden porch and hitching rail. Smoke curled from its stone chimney, promising warmth and humanity in the vast emptiness. Nakohi halted their group behind a ridge overlooking the building. Many tracks, he observed, studying the ground. Busy place, Elizabeth felt conflicting emotions surge through her, hope at returning to civilization, fear of the dangers Nakohi had warned about, and something else she couldn't name at the thought of their journey eventually ending. "Will you come with us?" she asked. Nako shook his head. "Not safe. Apache, not welcome." "Then we won't go," William declared firmly. The boy who had once been suspicious of Nakoshi now stood protectively beside him. "Must go," Nakoshi countered. "Need supplies, information." He reached into a small pouch at his waist and removed a handful of colorful glass beads, blue, red, and amber, strung on sinew. "Trade these. Worth much to right person." Elizabeth recognized their value immediately. "Nakoshi, I can't take these." "Need more than Nakoshi," he insisted, pressing them into her palm. "Ask for Pierre or his wife Louisa. They fair people." Reluctantly, Elizabeth nodded. They formed a plan. Elizabeth and the children would visit the trading post while Nakoshi waited, hidden in the rocks. If all seemed safe, they would purchase supplies and gather information. If danger presented itself, they would leave immediately. "Remember," Nakoshi cautioned as they prepared to separate. "Say nothing of Apache guide. Say husband died in accident. You find way alone." Elizabeth straightened her tattered dress as best she could, smoothed her children's hair, and led them down the dusty path to the trading post. Each step away from Nakoshi felt increasingly wrong, like leaving a limb behind. A bell jingled as they entered the dim interior. The smell of coffee, tobacco, and leather filled the air. Behind a rough wooden counter stood a barrel-chested man with a graying beard and a pious woman with intricate beadwork adorning her dress. "Welcome, strangers," the man said in a French-accented voice. "Pierre Dubois, at your service, and my wife Louisa." Elizabeth swallowed her nervousness. "Elizabeth Harmon, these are my children, William, Emma, and Sarah." Louisa's dark eyes assessed them shrewdly. "You have traveled far, yes?" And with difficulty. "It wasn't a question. Our wagon broke down," Elizabeth lied as rehearsed. "My husband, there was an accident. We've been making our way on foot." Pierre clucked sympathetically while Louisa disappeared into a back room, returning with a cup of water for each child. "Dangerous country for a woman alone," Pierre commented. "Many bad men about. Have you seen any strangers recently?" Elizabeth asked carefully. "Men who might be looking for us." Pierre and Louisa exchanged glances. "Why would men look for you?" Pierre asked. "My husband had enemies," Elizabeth improvised. "Business dealings gone wrong." Louisa nodded slowly. 2 days ago, 6 riders led by man with scar." She drew a line across her cheek. "Ask many questions." Elizabeth's heart raced. "Macready, what did you tell them?" "That we see no one," Pierre said firmly. "We mind our business here." As they spoke, the trading post door opened. 3 men entered, trail-worn, armed, with the hard eyes of frontier drifters. Elizabeth pulled Sarah closer, angling her body to shield her children. One of the men eyed them with interest. "Well now, what have we here?" Pierre's voice turned cold. "Paying customers, Hendricks. Something you rarely are." The implied warning hung in the air. After a tense moment, the men moved to a far corner, but Elizabeth could feel their eyes on her back. You have money for supplies? Pierre asked in a low voice. Elizabeth placed Narco's beads on the counter. Louisa's eyes widened slightly. Apache beads, she whispered. Very old, very valuable. A trader gave them to us, Elizabeth stammered. For water. Louisa looked unconvinced, but said nothing. Instead, she quickly gathered supplies. Flour, coffee, jerky, matches, a small pot, bandages, and a knife for Emma. For medicine plants, she explained with a knowing look at the girl. Any news of the cavalry? Elizabeth asked as Pierre wrapped their purchases. Captain Hargrove's patrol passed through yesterday, he replied. Heading southwest, hunting renegades, they say. More like hunting glory, Louisa muttered. That man has much hatred in his heart. The men in the corner had fallen silent, listening. Elizabeth sensed danger growing with each passing moment. We should go, she said quietly. Pierre nodded. Back door, he suggested, gesturing to a rear exit. Safer. As Louisa helped gather their supplies, she pressed a small package into Elizabeth's hand. Extra food, she whispered, and medicine. For your trader friend. Elizabeth's eyes met the Paiute woman's knowing gaze. Thank you, she breathed. They slipped out the back door as voices rose inside the trading post. William took the heaviest bundle, while Emma helped Sarah with her small pack. They moved quickly along the path Narcohai had shown them, away from the main trail. Mama, those men were looking at us funny, Sarah said as they hurried back toward the ridge. Don't worry about them, sweetheart, Elizabeth reassured her, though her own heart pounded with fear. As they rounded a bend, Narcohai materialized from the rocks so suddenly that Emma gasped. His expression was tense. You were seen, he stated. Men leave trading post now. Following. Elizabeth nodded grimly. McCready's gang came through 2 days ago, and Captain Hargrove yesterday. We must move fast. Different direction. Narcohai quickly distributed the supplies among their packs. No more trading posts. Too dangerous now. As they prepared to leave, Elizabeth touched his arm. The trader's wife knew the beads were Apache. I think she guessed about you. Louise, a good woman, won't tell. He studied Elizabeth's face. You afraid to return to your people now? The question caught her off guard with its insight. Was she afraid? Not of the physical dangers, but of returning to a world where men like Narcohai were considered savages, where her children would be taught to fear what they now trusted. I'm more afraid of losing what we found, she admitted softly. Something shifted in Narcohai's eyes, understanding, perhaps even hope. But there was no time to explore it as the distant sound of voices carried on the wind. Now we run, he said, taking Sarah onto his back. Together. Evening shadows lengthened as they made camp in a sheltered ravine. 2 days had passed since their hasty departure from the trading post, 2 days of hard travel through increasingly rugged terrain. But for the first time, they moved with the confidence of a unified group rather than desperate fugitives. Narcohai worked quietly by the small fire, his knife shaping a piece of pine wood with practiced precision. Sarah watched him intently, chin propped on her hands. What are you making? She finally asked. He held up the emerging form, a horse with flowing mane. For brave one who walks far without crying. Sarah's face lit up, like the clay one, but this won't break. Yes, this one lasts long time, like memory. He handed her the unfinished carving. Like friendship. The word hung in the air between them. Elizabeth, preparing their evening meal, glanced up to see her youngest daughter spontaneously wrap her arms around Narcohai's neck. For a moment the warrior looked startled, then his expression softened as he gently patted her back. I think you're not a savage at all, Sarah declared. No matter what the books say. Sarah, Elizabeth exclaimed, embarrassed, but Narcohai shook his head. Little one speaks true thoughts. Good way. He looked at Sarah seriously. Books written by people who never know Apache. Only fear them. William, returning with firewood, had overheard. My father's books said all Indians were bloodthirsty, he admitted, But they were wrong about you. Not all white men like those who attacked you. Nakahe replied, not all Apache like me. Judge each person by actions, not by what others say. Emma, who had been crushing juniper berries for tea as Nakahe had taught her, looked up thoughtfully, like how people at church said Catholics were all heathens. But then Mrs. Sullivan was so kind when Mother was ill. Elizabeth smiled at her perceptive daughter. Exactly like that, Emma. As they ate their simple meal, the conversation flowed more easily than ever before. William eagerly recounted the tracking skills he'd been practicing. Emma shared her observations about desert plants. Even Sarah contributed, demonstrating a game Nakahe had taught her, using small stones. Elizabeth watched her children with a mixture of pride and wonder. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, they were thriving in ways they never had in Boston. William showed a confidence that had been absent before. Emma's natural intelligence had found practical application. Sarah laughed more freely than she had since James's death. And Nakahe, the stoic warrior, had revealed himself to be patient, gentle, and surprisingly humorous in his quiet way. He treated her children not as burdens, but as young people worthy of respect and knowledge. As the children prepared for sleep, Nakahe motioned Elizabeth to join him at the edge of their camp. Need to talk, he said softly, about path ahead. Under the star-filled sky, he explained their options. They were being pursued from multiple directions now. The safest route would take them south toward the Mexican border, where small villages might accept a mixed family. But it would mean leaving American territory forever. What about the settlement? Elizabeth asked. The one on our map? Possible, Nakahe acknowledged. But dangerous for me. His eyes held hers steadily. And maybe for you too now. Because I've been traveling with an Apache? Because you see Apache as person now. Not all white people accept this. He gestured toward the sleeping children. They changed too. William not think like white boy anymore. Emma learn Apache medicine. Sarah, he smiled slightly. Sarah already half Apache in her heart. Elizabeth considered his words. And me? How have I changed? Nako, he studied her face in the moonlight. You stronger now. More free. His voice softened. More beautiful. The compliment caught her off guard. Heat rushed to her cheeks as their eyes held. I never thanked you properly, she whispered, for saving us. No need for thanks between. He hesitated, searching for the right word. Friends? Elizabeth suggested. More than friends, he replied simply. The honesty in his voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the night air. Before she could respond, a small sound from the campsite drew their attention. Sarah stood watching them, her wooden horse clutched to her chest. I had a bad dream, she said in a small voice. Nakahe immediately knelt to her level. What dream, little one? The bad men found us and took you away. Her lower lip trembled. Are you going to leave us? The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning beyond a child's nightmare. Elizabeth found herself holding her breath for his answer. Nakahe looked from Sarah to Elizabeth, then back to the child. No, he said firmly. Nakahe, stay with Sarah, and Emma, and William. His eyes returned to Elizabeth. With your mother. We face path ahead together. Sarah's face relaxed. Promise? Promise, he confirmed, offering his hand solemnly. The little girl placed her tiny palm against his larger one. Then I'm not scared anymore. As Elizabeth led her daughter back to bed, tucking the wooden horse beside her, she felt a certainty settling in her heart. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever choices awaited them, the five of them had become something neither she nor Nakahe had expected to find in the wilderness, a family. Later, as she returned to sit beside him under the vast desert sky, the silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. When his hand found hers in the darkness, she didn't pull away. The tarnished cavalry bugle lay half buried in the sand, a silent testament to some forgotten skirmish. William spotted it first, his eyes now trained to notice anything unusual on the landscape. Nakahe examined it carefully, before allowing him to pick it up. "Army patrol," he said, studying tracks in the soft earth. "Many horses, recent." Elizabeth felt a chill despite the morning warmth. "How recent?" "Before dawn. Moving that way." He pointed west, directly across their intended path. They had been traveling steadily southward for 3 days since leaving the trading post. The terrain had grown increasingly difficult, rocky outcroppings, giving way to steep canyons and treacherous slopes. But Nako had guided them confidently, finding hidden paths and water sources no settler would have noticed. "Can we go around them?" William asked, turning the abandoned bugle in his hands. Nako considered, then shook his head. "Take too long. Better to see them before they see us." He gestured for them to follow him up a nearby ridge. Crawling on their stomachs the last few yards, they peered over the edge into a shallow valley below. A cavalry patrol had made camp beside a small stream, perhaps 15 soldiers, their blue uniforms dusty from travel. Horses picketed nearby. "Captain Hargrove." "Nako," he whispered, nodding toward a tall figure giving orders to a group of men. Elizabeth studied the officer. His bearing was rigid, authoritative, his face set in hard lines beneath his campaign hat. This was the man responsible for the massacre of Nako's family, a fact that made her instinctively draw her children closer. As they watched, a commotion arose at the edge of the camp. 2 soldiers dragged forward a bound figure, an Apache man, his face bloodied, his bearing nevertheless proud. "One of your people?" Elizabeth whispered. Nako, he nodded grimly. "Young hunter, probably did not know soldiers were near." Below, Captain Hargrove approached the prisoner. Though they couldn't hear the words exchanged, the captain's contemptuous expression and the prisoner's defiant stance told their own story. Suddenly, Hargrove backhanded the Apache across the face. William gasped, his fingers tightening around the bugle. "Why would he do that?" the boy demanded. "The man is already captured." "Because he can," Nakohi replied simply. "Because to him, Apache not human." They watched in grim silence as the prisoner was tied to a wagon wheel. One soldier approached with a bucket of water, which he threw into the Apache's face, prompting cruel laughter from several others. "We should help him," William whispered fiercely. "Cannot," Nakohi said, though his jaw was tight with suppressed anger. "Too many soldiers." A new figure rode into camp, a civilian whose arrival caused immediate attention. Even from their distance, Elizabeth recognized Jalai Macready's tall form and distinctive hat. "The outlaw," she breathed. "With the cavalry. Not unusual," Nakohi explained softly. "Hargrove use men like Macready as scouts, hunters. Macready use army for protection, information." They watched as Hargrove and Macready conversed, the outlaw gesturing expansively toward the surrounding hills. A terrible suspicion formed in Elizabeth's mind. "They're working together to find us, aren't they?" Nakohi nodded. "Macready want no witnesses. Hargrove want Apache's scalp." His expression remained impassive, but Elizabeth saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. "Good soldiers in army, Hargrove not one of them." As they observed, a young lieutenant approached Hargrove, apparently objecting to something. The captain's response was immediate and harsh, addressing down that left the younger officer rigid with humiliation but silenced. "Not all agree with Captain," Nakohi observed, "but all obey." A soldier approached the captive Apache with a knife, making a threatening gesture across his own throat. The bound man showed no fear, staring defiantly at his tormentors. "We have to do something," Elizabeth whispered, unable to bear the cruelty unfolding below. Nakohi was silent for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he turned to William. "Can you make noise with that?" he asked, pointing to the bugle. William nodded eagerly. "My friend Sammy was a drummer boy. He showed me." "Good." Nakohi quickly outlined a plan. They would create a diversion on the far side of the camp, drawing attention away from the prisoner. In the confusion, Nakohi would attempt to free the captive. "Too dangerous," Elizabeth protested. "What if you're caught?" "Must try," Nakohi replied simply. "He would do same for me." The plan was quickly arranged. Elizabeth would take the girls to a sheltered position halfway down the opposite slope. William would accompany Nakohe to a point overlooking the far side of the camp. At Nakohe's signal, the boy would sound the bugle, then run immediately to rejoin his mother and sisters. Like hunting deer, Nakohe explained to William. Make noise here, deer run there. He pointed to the direction opposite their hidden position. Elizabeth embraced her son tightly before they separated. Be careful, she whispered. Do exactly as Nakohe says. I will, mother, William promised, his young face solemn with responsibility. From their sheltered position, Elizabeth and the girls watched as Nakohe and William disappeared into the rocks. Minutes stretched endlessly. Emma clutched her hand while Sarah buried her face against her mother's skirt. Suddenly the clear notes of a bugle call rang out across the valley. Assembly, the formal summons for troops to gather. The effect on the cavalry camp was immediate. Men jumped to their feet, horses whinnied nervously, and officers shouted contradictory orders. Look there, Emma whispered, pointing. A shadow moved swiftly along the edge of the camp. Nakohe, using the confusion to approach the bound prisoner. With a single slash of his knife, he cut the ropes. The freed Apache needed no instruction, immediately melting into the surrounding brush. The success was short-lived. A shout went up from the camp, and shots rang out. Elizabeth's heart froze as she saw Nakohe run, bullets kicking up dust at his heels. But where was William? Elizabeth had never known fear like the moments after the gunshots faded. Her eyes frantically searched the rocky slopes for any sign of her son or Nakohe. Sarah clung to her skirts while Emma stood perfectly still, listening. There, Emma suddenly whispered, pointing to movement among the boulders above them. William appeared first, sliding down the scree slope, his face flushed with excitement. Nakohe followed moments later, his expression grim but unharmed. You're safe, Elizabeth breathed, pulling William into a fierce embrace before reaching for Nakohe's arm. Both of you. No time, Nakohe warned. They search soon, must move quickly. They traveled without rest through the afternoon, taking a winding path through narrow canyons and across dry washes that Nakohe said would confuse their trail. By dusk they had reached a series of low hills covered with juniper and pinon pines, more vegetation than they had seen in days. Where are we going? Elizabeth asked as they climbed yet another ridge. Sacred place, Nakohe replied. Apache medicine grounds. Very old, very powerful. As night fell, they crested a final hill to see a small valley nestled among protective cliffs. In the center, a pool reflected the emerging stars, steam rising gently from its surface. The air carried a mineral scent, sulfur and something else, something ancient. Hot springs. Emma identified, her scientific mind always working. Like the ones in the geography books. Nakohe nodded approvingly. Healing waters, gifts from Earth Mother. He paused at the edge of the valley, removing his weapons and placing them carefully on a flat stone. Must enter with respect. Sacred ground. Elizabeth watched as he performed a brief ritual, offering pinches of something from his medicine pouch to the four directions, murmuring words in his own language, then waiting in silence as if for permission to proceed. You sure it's safe? William asked, still keyed up from their narrow escape. Safer than anywhere, Nakohe assured him. Few white men know this place. Those who do avoid it. Think bad spirits live here. And do they? Sarah asked, wide-eyed. Nakohe smiled slightly. Only good spirits here. Spirits of healing, of life. They made camp near the springs, and for the first time in days, Nakohe allowed a larger fire. The warmth and light brought a sense of security after their harrowing day. One by one, the children succumbed to exhaustion, curling together under blankets from their packs. Elizabeth's wound, though mostly healed, still ached after the day's exertion. Seeing her discomfort, Nakohe gestured toward the springs. Waters heal, he said simply. You should go. She hesitated, glancing at her sleeping children. I watch them, he promised. You go. Private pool behind rocks. Elizabeth followed his directions to find a smaller spring sheltered by boulders. Steam rose invitingly from the clear water. After ensuring her privacy, she removed her tattered dress and slipped into the pool, gasping at the initial heat before her muscles surrendered to its soothing embrace. The mineral-rich water seemed to draw the ache from her body. She examined her side where the knife wound had left an angry red scar. As she bathed it gently, she reflected on how close she had come to death, how different her life had become in mere weeks. After bathing, Elizabeth dressed in her cleanest remaining clothes and returned to find Nekohi seated cross-legged near the fire, watching over her children. He looked up as she approached, his dark eyes reflecting the flames. "Better?" he asked. "Much," she admitted, sitting beside him. "Thank you for bringing us here. Not only for healing waters," he explained. "This place, special to my people. My grandfather brought me here as boy for coming-of-age ceremony." He gestured toward a series of caves visible in the cliff face. Ancient ones left marks there. Stories in stone. "Can we see them? Tomorrow. Children enjoy." He studied her face in the firelight. "You worried still?" "It wasn't a question." Elizabeth nodded, drawing her knees to her chest. "McCready working with the cavalry. I didn't expect that. It changes things. Makes path harder." Nekohi agreed. "Not impossible. You risked your life today," she said quietly. "For a stranger. No Apache stranger to other Apache," he replied. "All connected. Like family. Like us now." The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Nekohi was silent for a long moment, gazing into the fire. "More than family," he finally said, his voice low, something without name. The simple honesty of his words touched something deep within Elizabeth. Without overthinking, she reached for his hand. His fingers were calloused from a lifetime of survival, yet his touch was gentle as they entwined with hers. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling softly, the children's steady breathing creating a peaceful rhythm. The dangers surrounding them seemed momentarily distant, held at bay by the sanctity of this ancient place. "In Boston," Elizabeth said softly, "this would be considered inappropriate. Here it is truth," Nekohi replied. "Nothing more true than two souls finding each other." He turned to face her fully, reaching up to touch a strand of hair that had fallen across her cheek. The gesture was so tender, so careful, that Elizabeth felt tears spring to her eyes. "I never expected," she began, then stopped, unable to articulate the transformation within her. "None of us see path before walking it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. In the flickering firelight, with the sacred springs shimmering behind them and the ancient cliffs standing guard, Elizabeth leaned forward. Their lips met in a kiss as gentle as a whisper, as profound as a promise. When they parted, stars wheeled overhead in the vast desert sky, witnesses to something rare and precious blooming in the most unlikely of places. Morning light filtered through the valley, casting long shadows across the ancient medicine grounds. Elizabeth stood at a literal and figurative crossroad. Before them, the trail split, one path leading toward the settlements marked on their tattered map, the other winding south toward the Mexican border. "Must decide today," Nekohi said quietly, standing beside her at the fork in the trail. "Cavalry search Wida now, McCready too." 3 days at the healing springs had restored their strength. Elizabeth's wound was finally fully healed. The children had rested and explored the caves with their mysterious pictographs, and they had all bathed in the mineral waters. But they couldn't remain in this sanctuary forever. "If we go to the settlement," Elizabeth mused, "we'd find other white families, schools for the children, a chance to rebuild." "Yes," Nekohi agreed, his expression carefully neutral. "Those things there," the unspoken hung between them. There would be no place for him in that life. Apache men were not welcome in white settlements, except perhaps as prisoners or curiosities. And if we go south, small villages along border, Mexican, Apache, white, all mix there. Some accept, some not. Harder life, but, he hesitated, together possible. Together, The word encompassed so much now. In the past days, something profound had shifted between them. The night of their first kiss had led to long conversations beside the fire after the children slept, sharing stories, dreams, beliefs. Nothing improper had occurred, yet Elizabeth felt bound to him in ways she couldn't fully explain. "I need to speak with the children," she said finally. She found them by the small pool where Emma had discovered tadpoles. William was showing Sarah how to skip stones across the surface, a skill Nako had taught him. "Children," Elizabeth called, "come sit with me for a moment." They gathered around her on sun-warmed rocks, their faces expectant. Even in these difficult circumstances, they had thrived in the wilderness, tanned, stronger, more confident than they had been in Boston. "We need to decide where to go next," she explained. "We can try to reach the settlement where other white families live, or we can go south toward Mexico, where," she hesitated, "where Nako might be able to stay with us." "If we go to the settlement, would Nako have to leave?" Sarah asked immediately, her small face creasing with worry. "Most likely, yes," Elizabeth answered honestly. "Then I don't want to go there," her youngest declared firmly, clutching the wooden horse he had carved for her. William, who had been skipping stones with increasing skill, threw one last stone with particular force. "Those people at the settlement, would they be like Captain Hargrove and those soldiers we saw?" "Not all of them," Elizabeth said carefully, "but some might view Nako the way they did." William's jaw tightened in a way that reminded her painfully of James. "I don't want to live with people like that. They're the real savages." Emma, always thoughtful, had been silent. "What about school, Mother?" "Our education. There would be schools in the settlement," Elizabeth acknowledged. "In the border villages, perhaps not formal schools, but Nako teaches us more useful things than we ever learned in school," William interrupted. "How to find water, how to track, which plants heal and which harm. And he tells the best stories," Sarah added. "Better than any books." Emma nodded slowly. "I've learned more about plants and medicine in these weeks than in all my studies before." She looked at her mother directly. "And you've changed too, Mother. You're stronger now, happier even with all the danger." Elizabeth felt tears prick her eyes at her daughter's perception. "Am I?" "When you look at Nako," Emma said simply, "you smile the way you used to smile at Father, but different too, more equal." Out of the mouths of babes, Elizabeth thought, wondering when her middle child had become so insightful. "So we all agree?" William asked, looking at his sisters. "We go south with Nako, Sarah nodded vigorously, Emma more slowly, but with equal conviction. "It won't be easy," Elizabeth cautioned them. "We'd be leaving everything familiar behind." "We already did that when we left Boston," William pointed out. "And then again when Father died." "We're not afraid," Emma added. "Not anymore." Elizabeth gathered her children close, overwhelmed by their courage and wisdom. "Then we should tell Nako our decision." They found him preparing their packs for the journey, his movements efficient and practiced. He looked up as they approached, his expression questioning. "We want to go south," William announced before Elizabeth could speak. "With you." Something flickered in Nako's normally impassive face, surprise, then a deeper emotion he quickly controlled. "You sure?" he asked, looking at each of them before his eyes settled on Elizabeth. "We're sure," she confirmed softly. "All of us." He nodded once, absorbing this. "Path not easy," he warned. "Long journey, many dangers still." "We know," Elizabeth said, "but we'll face them together." As they prepared to leave the sacred valley, Nako had performed a brief ceremony of thanks, teaching the children to offer pinches of cornmeal to the spirits of the place. Sarah solemnly mimicked his movements, while Emma and William followed with genuine respect. Elizabeth watched, thinking how impossible this scene would have seemed mere weeks ago, yet nothing had ever felt more right. Their departure was interrupted by the distant but unmistakable sound of horses approaching. The sound of approaching horses galvanized them into action. Nako quickly scattered their belongings, erasing signs of their camp. No time for South Trail, he said urgently. Must split up. Harder to track. Elizabeth's heart clenched. Split up? No. Only way, Naka, he insisted. I take William Emma through canyon. He pointed to a narrow passage cutting through the western cliff. You take Sarah east, through brush. Less tracks on hard ground. From his pack he produced a small polished metal disc, a signal mirror. When safe, use this, sun flash, from high point. He demonstrated the technique, then pressed it into Elizabeth's hand. 3 flashes. I answer same. We meet at Flat Mesa. He pointed to a distinctive formation visible in the distance. How long? Elizabeth asked, fighting rising panic. 4 days. No more. His eyes held hers, conveying strength and reassurance. If no signal by 4th sunset, go south. Follow morning star. Elizabeth nodded, her throat tight. William appeared at her side, his face pale but determined. I can go with Mother and Sarah, he offered, to protect them. Nakohe shook his head. Need you to help with Emma. Need strong boy who knows tracking. He placed his hands on William's shoulders. Trust you to help keep sister safe. The boy straightened under this responsibility. I won't let you down. Nakohe turned to Emma. Stay close to me. Move quiet like I showed you. Remember plants I taught you, which hide scent, which make sleep if needed. Emma nodded solemnly. I remember everything. The horses sounded closer. No time remained for lengthy goodbyes. Elizabeth embraced her older children fiercely. Be brave, she whispered. Do exactly as Nakoko says. We will, Mother. Emma promised, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Elizabeth turned to Nakoko, words failing her. He touched her cheek briefly. 4 days, he repeated. Then together again. With that, they separated. Nakoko, leading William and Emma toward the canyon, while Elizabeth took Sarah's hand and headed eastward through the sparse brush. Will we see them again, Mama? Sarah asked, as they scrambled over rocky terrain. Of course we will, Elizabeth assured her, praying it was true. Nakoko knows what he's doing. This is to keep us all safe. They traveled until Sarah's small legs could carry her no further. Finding shelter beneath an overhanging ledge, Elizabeth made a tiny fire well hidden from view. As night fell, she held her youngest close, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. Nakoko says coyotes sing to remember they're not alone. Sarah murmured sleepily. Are we alone, Mama? No, Elizabeth answered, stroking her daughter's hair. We're never alone. Nakoko and William and Emma are thinking of us, just as we're thinking of them. Nakoko is like our father now, isn't he? Sarah asked, the innocent question catching Elizabeth by surprise. What makes you say that? He takes care of us. He teaches us things, and he looks at you the way Papa used to. Sarah yawned. I think he would be a good father. Out of the mouths of babes, Elizabeth thought, not for the first time. Let's get some sleep, she said softly. We have a long journey tomorrow. Meanwhile, Nakoko led William and Emma through the twisting canyon, moving swiftly in the deepening shadows. 2 riders followed our trail to springs, he explained as they paused for breath. Others still searching. Need to make false trail. Lead away from your mother and sister. William nodded, understanding the strategy. Like when you showed me how deer double back to confuse wolves. Yes, exactly same. Nakoko squeezed the boy's shoulder approvingly. You remember well, Emma, ever observant, had been gathering certain plants along their path. These are the ones that disguise scent, right? She asked, showing Nakoko the crushed leaves. Good girl. Rub on boots, clothes. He watched as the children followed his instruction. Now we make tracks easy to follow, then disappear. For the next 2 days, they executed Nakoko's plan, leaving obvious signs for their pursuers to follow, then abruptly vanishing by walking through streams, across rocky plateaus, and using every trick Nakoko had in his extensive knowledge of the wilderness. William proved an apt pupil, quickly grasping the concept of false trails and adding his own ideas. Emma's knowledge of plants provided unexpected help. A tea she brewed gave them energy during their long treks, while another mixture helped disguise their human scent from tracking dogs they heard baying in the distance. On the third morning, as they perched on a high ridge to scout their back trail, William spotted dust rising from multiple directions. "They're still looking for us," he said, his young face grim. Nako nodded. "McCready's stubborn man, Hargrove too. Why do they hate you so much?" Emma asked. "What did Apaches ever do to them?" Nako considered the question carefully. "Land, money, power." He gestured to the vast landscape. "All this wants Apache land. Rich men want mines, cattle land, railroad paths. Army move Apache so others take land." "That's not fair," William protested. "World not fair," Nako agreed. "But not all white men think like McCready and Hargrove. Your father different, your mother different." He smiled slightly. "You different." That evening, they reached the mesa where they were to meet Elizabeth and Sarah. Climbing to its highest point, Nako used his own signal mirror to send 3 flashes toward the east, where Elizabeth should be approaching. There was no answering signal. "Maybe they're not in position yet," Emma suggested, seeing the concern on Nako's face. "Maybe," he agreed, though his expression remained troubled. William stood scanning the horizon, shading his eyes against the setting sun. "What if the bad men found them?" he asked, voicing their shared fear. Nako placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your mother smart, strong, little Sarah quiet when needed. They safe until we find them." But as the 4th day dawned with still no signal, even Nako's composure showed cracks. He sent signals at dawn, midday and dusk, with no response. "We need to look for them," William insisted, pacing the mesa top like a caged animal. For once, Nako seemed uncertain. "If we leave meeting place, Mother would have come if she could," Emma said quietly. "Something's wrong." Nako made his decision. "First light tomorrow, we tracked." Elizabeth adjusted Sarah on her hip, wincing at the strain on her tired muscles. They had been forced to abandon their planned route when they stumbled upon a cavalry patrol, camped along the eastern approach to the mesa. For 2 days, they had circled cautiously, seeking another path to the rendezvous point. But soldiers seemed to be everywhere. "Are we lost, Mama?" Sarah asked, her small face grimy with dust and fatigue. "No, sweetheart. Just taking a different way to meet Nako and your brother and sister." Elizabeth forced confidence into her voice. "Look there. That must be the border marker," Nako mentioned. The stone rose from the desert floor like a sentinel, weathered, sand-blasted, with faded engravings marking the boundary between American and Mexican territories. So close to potential safety, yet the terrain between here and there was the most challenging they had yet faced. "If we can get past those mountains," Elizabeth murmured, "we'll be in Mexico. Will Nako find us there?" "Yes," Elizabeth said, praying it was true. "He can track anything, remember?" They had managed to preserve the signal mirror despite their difficulties. Twice, Elizabeth had climbed to high points and attempted to signal the mesa, but either the angle was wrong or there was no one there to see it. The 4th day had come and gone, and with it the growing fear that something had happened to Nako and her older children. Setting Sarah down, Elizabeth surveyed the terrain ahead. Rocky foothills rose gradually toward a mountain path. Beyond that, according to Nako's descriptions, lay Mexican villages where they might find sanctuary. But first, they had to cross this exposed stretch with minimal water and no protection from the sun. "We'll rest until dusk," she decided. "Then travel by night when it's cooler." Sarah nodded, too exhausted to protest. They sheltered in the meager shade of a boulder, sharing sips from their nearly empty water skin. Elizabeth stroked her daughter's hair as she dozed, marveling at the child's resilience. Sarah had complained little despite their hardships, finding joy in small things: a lizard's darting path, the pattern of stars at night, the memory of Nako's stories. As sunset painted the desert in copper and gold, Elizabeth gently woke her daughter. Time to go, little one. They had walked less than an hour when Sarah tugged urgently at her mother's skirt. Mama, look. Elizabeth followed her pointing finger to see a flicker of light on a distant ridge once, twice, 3 times. The signal. Fumbling in her pack, she retrieved the mirror. Though darkness was falling, enough light remained to catch the fading sun. She angled it carefully, sending 3 answering flashes. A figure appeared on the ridge, then 2 smaller ones beside it. Even at this distance, she recognized them immediately. It's them, Sarah squealed, jumping with excitement. Mama, they found us. Stay here, Elizabeth instructed, settling Sarah in a protected spot. I'm going to climb that rise so they can see exactly where we are. Scrambling up the rocky incline, she sent another series of flashes. The figures on the ridge began moving in their direction. Elizabeth's heart soared with relief and joy. Her elation was short-lived. A glint of metal from a much closer position caught her eye, the unmistakable reflection of firelight on a rifle barrel. Between their position and Nako's approach, armed men were concealed among the rocks. An ambush, sliding back down to Sarah, Elizabeth quickly gathered their meager belongings. We need to move, now, she whispered urgently. There are bad men between us and Nako, but we just found them, Sarah protested. And we need to warn them, Elizabeth explained, taking her daughter's hand. Come. Quickly, they circled wide, using the growing darkness as cover, making for a position where they might intercept Nako's approach. Elizabeth's mind raced. How many men were waiting? Were they Macready's gang or Hargrove's soldiers? Either way, Nako was walking into danger and bringing her children with him. After a desperate half-hour of careful movement, they spotted 3 figures moving cautiously through the twilight. Elizabeth pressed a finger to her lips, warning Sarah to remain silent, then made a soft bird call Nako had taught them as a recognition signal. The figures froze. The call was returned. Moments later, they were reunited. William and Emma rushing into Elizabeth's embrace, while Nako scanned the surrounding terrain, alert for danger. Ambush, Elizabeth whispered, pointing toward where she had spotted the hidden men. At least 3, maybe more. Nako nodded grimly. 6 men. Macready's gang. Following us since Meisha. He touched her cheek briefly. Glad you safe. Worried when no signal came. There were soldiers everywhere, she explained. We couldn't reach the meeting point. No time now, he said, glancing toward the darkening sky. Need reach pass before dawn. Border just beyond. The men, Elizabeth began. Know they there, Nako, he assured her. We'll go different way. More climbing, but safer. Together again, they moved through the night, taking a treacherous route up rocky slopes that horses couldn't follow. William helped his mother navigate the difficult terrain, while Nako carried a now sleeping Sarah. Emma identified edible cacti that provided precious moisture when their water ran out. Near midnight, they paused on a high ledge overlooking the desert they had crossed. Far below, pinpricks of light marked campfires. Macready's men still searching, unaware that their quarry had slipped past them. 2 more hours to pass, Nako, he said softly. Then downhill to border. Elizabeth leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. So close, she murmured. Yes, he agreed, his arms strong around her. New life waiting, he hesitated, then added, if still want that, with me. She looked up at him, surprised by the uncertainty in his voice. Of course we do. All of us. William, who had been listening, nodded firmly. We decided, remember. We go together. Emma, ever practical, added, we've come too far to change our minds now. Sarah stirred in Nako's arms, blinking sleepily. Are we home yet? Not yet, little one, Nako, he answered gently. But soon, as they prepared to continue their journey, a distant sound froze them in place. The rhythmic hoofbeats of horses, many of them approaching from the north. Cavalry patrol, Nako, he confirmed after listening intently. Large group. Hargrove? Elizabeth asked, fear clutching at her heart. Nakohe nodded grimly. Moving fast, toward pass. Their last escape route was about to be cut off. Dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, illuminating their desperate situation. From their position high on the rocky slope, they could see the cavalry patrol, at least 20 blue-coated soldiers, setting up a blockade across the narrow mountain pass. To the south lay Mexico and freedom. To the north, McCready's gang was closing in, having discovered their true trail sometime in the night. "Trapped," William whispered, his young face grim as he surveyed the terrain through Nakohe's spyglass. "Not trapped," Nakohe corrected, removing his bow from its protective wrapping. "Not while still breathe." The weapon was a thing of beauty, carefully crafted yew wood backed with sinew, the grip wrapped in buckskin, worn smooth from years of use. Nakohe tested the string, then checked his remaining arrows. "See that formation?" He pointed to a cluster of massive boulders halfway up the mountainside. "Good defensive position, high ground. One approach only." Elizabeth understood immediately. "You want to make a stand there?" Nakohe nodded. "No choice now, fight or surrender." "And if we surrender?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "For children, maybe mercy," he said carefully. "For you," he hesitated. "Woman who runs with Apache, not good. For me," he made a slashing motion across his throat. "Then we don't surrender," William stated firmly, standing taller. "I need honest answer," Nako said, looking at each of them. "Ready to fight? Even little one must be brave." Sarah clutched her wooden horse, her small face solemn. "I can be brave." Emma nodded, her analytical mind already working. "We have higher ground and better cover. They'll have to come up that narrow trail. We can hold them off." "With what weapons?" Elizabeth asked. They had Nakohe's bow, William's small knife, and the larger one Elizabeth carried. Against rifles and revolvers, it seemed hopeless. "Have 6 arrows," Nakohe said. "Make count. Also this." He produced a cavalry revolver, one Elizabeth had never seen before. "Took from soldier at trading post. 5 bullets. 11 shots against 20 soldiers and 6 outlaws," William calculated. "And surprise," Nakohe added, "they not expect fight from women and children." They moved quickly to the boulder formation, finding it even better than it had appeared from a distance. A natural stone wall provided cover on 3 sides, with a clear view of the only approach, a narrow trail winding up from below. A small hollow at the back offered shelter for Sarah. Nakohe arranged them strategically, William on the left flank, with his knife ready if anyone managed to climb up that side. Emma beside her mother at the center, with small stones to throw as distraction, and Elizabeth, with the revolver. Nakohe would use his bow from a slightly higher position, where his deadly accuracy would be most effective. "Wait for my signal," he instructed. "Let them come close before shooting." Elizabeth checked the revolver with trembling hand. James had taught her to shoot years ago, but she had never fired at a human being. Could she do it now, even to protect her children? As if reading her thoughts, Nakohe knelt beside her. "Aim for body, not head," he advised quietly. "Larger target. Don't think about man, think about children, needing mother." She nodded, drawing strength from his calm confidence. They didn't wait long. McCready's gang arrived first, having tracked them through the night. 6 riders approached cautiously, scanning the slope. "The woman and brats have to be here somewhere," McCready's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "Spread out, $500 to whoever finds them." "And the Apache?" one of his men asked. "His scalp is mine," McCready answered coldly. "Army pays extra for renegades." The outlaws separated, 2 remaining on horseback, while 4 proceeded on foot, checking crevices and potential hiding spots. One headed directly toward their position, following their tracks with the skill of an experienced tracker. "Riley coming," Nakohe whispered. "Best tracker. Must take him first." Elizabeth watched as the man called Riley studied the ground, moving steadily closer to their hiding place. When he was 30 yards away, Nakohe drew his bow. The arrow flew true, striking Riley in the chest. He fell without a sound. "Cover," Nakohe commanded, as he quickly nocked another arrow. The response was immediate. Gunfire erupted from below, as the remaining outlaws sought cover, firing blindly toward the boulders. "Mama, I'm scared," Sarah whimpered from her protected hollow. "Stay down, sweetheart," Elizabeth called. "Remember what Nakohe taught you about being still as a rabbit." A flash of movement caught her eye. One of the outlaws was working his way up the slope, using rocks for cover. Elizabeth raised the revolver, took careful aim, and squeezed the trigger. The man fell, clutching his leg. "Good shot," Nakohe approved, loosing another arrow at the outlaws below. The firefight continued for several minutes. Nakohe's arrows found 2 more targets, while Elizabeth's carefully conserved shots kept the others pinned down. William remained vigilant on the flank, though no one had attempted that approach yet. Then the cavalry arrived. Captain Hargrove's voice boomed across the mountainside. "Macready, what's the shooting about?" "Found your renegade, Captain," Macready shouted back. "Holed up in them rocks with the woman and kids." There was a brief consultation, then Hargrove's voice again. "Surround the position. No one escapes." The situation deteriorated rapidly. Soldiers joined the outlaws, taking positions that allowed them to cover all possible escape routes. Bullets whined off the rocks around them, showering them with stone fragments. "We need to conserve ammunition," Elizabeth said as she ducked another volley. Nakohe nodded grimly. 2 arrows left. "You have 3 bullets. They're not rushing us," William observed. "Why?" "Waiting for something," Nakohe replied, his eyes scanning the slopes. Emma, who had been watching the soldiers' movements, suddenly pointed. "Look, they're bringing up a cannon." Sure enough, several soldiers were manhandling a small mountain howitzer into position, a portable cannon designed for exactly this type of terrain. If they use that, Elizabeth didn't need to finish the thought. Their stone shelter would become a death trap. Nakohe's expression was resolute. "I go down, draw fire. You take children, run West Ridge while they distracted." "No," the word burst from Elizabeth with unexpected force. "We stay together," we decided. William moved to stand beside his mother. "All of us or none of us." Emma joined them, her hand finding Nakohe's. "Family stays together." Sarah crawled from her hollow, clutching her wooden horse. "Don't leave us, father." The word hung in the air between them. Nakohe's stoic expression softened as he looked at each of them in turn, then at Elizabeth. "Together then," he agreed softly. "Face whatever comes." As the soldiers prepared to fire the howitzer, the family drew closer, weapons ready for one final stand. The howitzer crew had just positioned their weapon when a new sound cut through the gunfire, a high, ululating war cry from the western ridge. Every head turned to see a line of mounted Apache warriors silhouetted against the morning sky, weapons raised. "Apache!" a soldier shouted in alarm. Captain Hargrove's voice rose above the sudden chaos. "Defensive positions, prepare to engage." Nako stared in disbelief. "Cousins," he whispered, "my people." The Apache warriors descended the slope like avenging spirits, their horses navigating the treacherous terrain with impossible agility. Leading them was a powerfully built man, whose resemblance to Nako was unmistakable. "Taklasham," Nako I identified. "My father's brother's son, thought dead in Canyon Creek fight." Before the soldiers could regroup, another unexpected force appeared from the south. A dozen Mexican vaqueros galloping up from the border, rifles ready. Caught between 2 attacking forces, the cavalry and outlaws scattered for cover. "Now," Nako commanded. While confused, "Run for South Ridge." They abandoned their shelter, Elizabeth carrying Sarah, while Nako provided covering fire with his remaining arrows. William and Emma ran ahead, staying low as bullets whizzed overhead. "There they go," Macready's voice cut through the din. "Don't let them reach the Mexicans." The outlaw leader himself emerged from behind a boulder, rifle aimed directly at Elizabeth. Back. Nako saw the threat but was too far to intervene. William didn't hesitate. With a fierce cry, the boy launched himself at Macready, his small knife slashing across the outlaw's gun hand. Startled, Macready dropped his rifle, cursing as he grabbed for his revolver with his uninjured hand. Before he could draw, a shot rang out. Macready staggered, a look of surprise crossing his weathered face before he collapsed. Behind him stood Elizabeth, Nakohe's revolver still extended. wisps of smoke curling from its barrel. "No one threatens my children," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Nakahe reached them in 3 long strides, pulling William and Elizabeth behind cover as return fire erupted from the remaining outlaws. "Brave woman," he said, pride evident in his voice. "Brave son." The Apache warriors had engaged the main cavalry force, while the vaqueros focused on the outlaws. In the confusion, Nakahe led his family along a sheltered gully toward the Mexican side of the pass. They had nearly reached safety when Captain Hargrove appeared before them, his uniform dusty but his bearing rigid with authority. "That's far enough," he said, revolver aimed at Nakahe's chest. "The renegade comes with me." Elizabeth stepped forward, placing herself between Hargrove and Nakahe. "He's not a renegade. He saved our lives." "Stand aside, ma'am," Hargrove ordered. "Apache sympathizers are as guilty as the savages themselves." "The only savage here is you," William declared, standing beside his mother. Hargrove's face twisted with rage. "Insolent brat. You'll watch your Apache friend hang before I send you back to civilization to learn some respect." "No more hanging," came a new voice. Teclishum appeared on a ridge above them, bow drawn and aimed at Hargrove. "No more Apache children die by your hand." Hargrove's eyes darted between his opponents, calculating his chances. "You're outnumbered, Captain," Elizabeth said quietly. "Your men are retreating. Please, let this end." For a moment it seemed Hargrove might lower his weapon. Then his expression hardened. "Never," he spat, swinging his revolver toward Nako. 2 shots fired simultaneously, Taklishim's arrow and a bullet from the ridge behind them. Hargrove crumpled, his unfired revolver falling from lifeless fingers. A Mexican vaquero approached, rifle still smoking. "Ese hombre era un demonio," he said grimly. "The devil himself." The battle around them was ending as quickly as it had begun. The remaining soldiers retreated northward, carrying their wounded. Macready's surviving men had been captured by the vaqueros. In the sudden quiet, Nako approached Taklishim, who had descended from the ridge. The 2 men stood facing each other, years of separation and shared grief between them. "Brother," Taklishim said in Apache, then embraced Nako fiercely. Elizabeth watched as the 2 men spoke rapidly in their native tongue, Nako occasionally gesturing toward her and the children. Finally he turned to them. "Taklishim searched for me many moons," he explained. "After massacre, few survive, hide in mountains, rebuild strength. He tracked me all this way." "How did he find us?" Emma asked, her scientific mind always seeking understanding. Nako smiled. "I leave signs, small marks only Apache recognize. Hope someday my people know I still live." The leader of the vaqueros approached, a weathered man with kind eyes and a magnificent silver-embroidered sombrero. "Don Manuel Ortega." He introduced himself with a small bow. "At your service." Elizabeth thanked him for his timely intervention. "It was Señor Nakahe's cousin who alerted us," Don Manuel explained. "We patrol the border to protect villages from men like Hargrove and Macready." He studied the family with interest. "You are welcome in Puerto del Sol. Many families like yours. How do you say, mixed blood? Is it safe there?" Elizabeth asked. "Safer than here," Don Manuel replied with a shrug. "No place perfect, but our village respect good people, no matter where they come from." As they prepared to leave the battlefield, an elderly Apache approached, his face deeply lined with age and wisdom. He carried an intricately decorated pipe, its wooden stem adorned with feathers and beads. "Elder sees great spirit in you," Nakohe translated as the old man addressed Elizabeth. "Says woman with hair like sun brings new life to Nakohe, new path to his people." The elder passed the ceremonial pipe to Nakohe, speaking at length. "Peace pipe," Nakohe explained. "Very old, very sacred. Elder says we bring 2 worlds together, like smoke from pipe connects earth to sky." The old man placed one hand on Elizabeth's head, the other on Nakohe's, speaking solemnly. "What did he say?" Sarah asked when he had finished. He give blessing, Nakohe replied, his voice thick with emotion. Say we now family and eyes of Apache ancestors. As they made their way down the mountain toward the Mexican border, Elizabeth walked beside Nakohe, their shoulders occasionally touching. Behind them came William and Emma, already deep in conversation with young Apache warriors, eager to share knowledge. Sarah rode proudly on Taklishim's horse, her wooden carving clutched tightly in one small hand. Your people accepted us quickly, Elizabeth observed. Apache judge by heart, by actions, Nakohe replied. You fight beside me, protect children. This all that matters. And the future, she asked softly. Where do we go from here? Nakohe's hand found hers, strong fingers intertwining with her own. Together, he said simply. That only certain thing. The village of Puerto del Sol nestled in a verdant valley just south of the border, its adobe buildings gleaming golden in the afternoon sun. Orchards and gardens surrounded the settlement, a stark contrast to the harsh desert they had traversed. As they approached, children ran out to meet them, excited by the unusual procession of Apache warriors and returning vaqueros. Elizabeth marveled at the diverse faces welcoming them, Mexican, Apache, European, and every combination thereof. This was a place where boundaries blurred, where people were judged by character rather than origin. Many stories here, Nakohe observed, noting her wonder. Many paths crossing. Don Manuel led them to the village square, where curious residents gathered. He explained their situation in rapid Spanish, gesturing toward Elizabeth and her children, then to Nakohe and his Apache relatives. Nods of understanding and murmurs of sympathy spread through the crowd. An elderly woman stepped forward, introducing herself as Doña Luz, the village healer. Come, she said in accented English, beckoning to Emma. You like plants, medicine? I show you. Emma's face lit up as she looked to her mother for permission. Elizabeth nodded, touched by the immediate acceptance. A boy about William's age approached next, offering to show him where the village boys practiced with their horses. Sarah was already playing with several young children, language barriers meaningless in the universal games of childhood. They will be happy here, Taklishim said, watching the children integrate so naturally. Strong spirits find their place quickly. That evening a feast was prepared to celebrate both the victory over Hargrove's forces and the arrival of new community members. Tables laden with unfamiliar but delicious foods filled the village square. Music played as the Apache warriors and Mexican vaqueros, so recently allies in battle, shared stories and laughter. Elizabeth sat beside Nakohe, watching her children thrive in this new environment. William was demonstrating the tracking skills Nakohe had taught him to impress local boys. Emma deep in conversation with Doña Luz about healing plants. Sarah danced with the village children, her golden hair flying as she spun in circles. Happy? Nakohe asked softly. Yes, Elizabeth replied, surprised to realize how completely she meant it. I never imagined such a place could exist. Two worlds meeting, he said, like us. As the celebration continued, Doña Luz approached with several village elders. She carried a beautifully woven blanket, draped over her arms, intricate patterns of red, black, and white forming symbols. Elizabeth didn't recognize. Wedding blanket, Nakohe explained, his eyes questioning as he looked at Elizabeth. Traditional for Apache couples, if you wish. The implication was clear. Elizabeth felt a blush rise to her cheeks, aware of the many eyes upon them. Is this a proposal? She asked quietly. Yes, he answered simply. Been proposing since medicine grounds, just not with words. Elizabeth smiled, remembering their first kiss beside the healing springs. How far they had come since then, how completely her world had transformed. She thought briefly of Boston, of the life she had once known. It seemed a distant dream now, belonging to a different woman. I accept, she said, her voice strong and certain. The village erupted in cheers. William, Emma, and Sarah rushed to their mother's side, faces alight with joy. Does this mean Nako will really be our father now? Sarah asked, clutching her wooden horse. If you wish it, Nakohe said seriously, kneeling to the child's level. I wished it a long time ago, Sarah declared, throwing her arms around his neck. Emma approached more carefully. What about Papa? She asked Elizabeth. Will you forget him? Never, Elizabeth assured her. Your father will always be part of us, part of our story. Nakohe understands that. She looked to him for confirmation. James bring you west, Nakohe said. Give you strength to survive. Good man lives on in children. I honor his memory. William, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Father wanted us to have a better life. I think he would approve of this one. He extended his hand to Nakohe in a very adult gesture. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for trusting me, Nakohe replied, clasping the boy's hand firmly. The ceremony took place at sunset 3 days later, combining Apache traditions with elements of Elizabeth's faith. Tekleshim stood as witness for Nakohe, while Donia Luz represented Elizabeth. The children participated fully, William undertaking a brief ritual hunt with the Apache men, Emma helping prepare traditional medicines, and Sarah scattering flower petals along the path. The wedding blanket was wrapped around both their shoulders as they exchanged promises beneath the vast desert sky, binding them together in the sight of both their peoples. Later, as they stood on the porch of the small house the village had helped them prepare, Elizabeth watched the rising moon cast silver light across the landscape. So much had changed in such a short time. The woman who had left Boston months ago would never have imagined this outcome. A new family forged in danger and hardship, a new home in a place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. I should write to my sister in Boston, she mused. She'll think we perished in the wilderness if she doesn't hear from us. What will you tell her? Nakohe asked, his arm warm around her waist. Elizabeth considered the question. How could she possibly explain all that had happened? The attack, their desperate flight, the transformation of her children, the unexpected love that had bloomed in the harshest of circumstances. I'll tell her we found something we never expected, she said finally, a place where we belong. From inside came the sounds of the children preparing for bed. William telling Sarah a story that blended his father's tales of knights with Nakohe's Apache legends. Emma organizing her growing collection of medicinal plants, normal, domestic sounds that seemed miraculous after all they had endured. Ghost Valley brought death, Nakohe observed, but also new life. Elizabeth turned in his arms, her hand resting against his chest where she could feel the steady beating of his heart. Not Ghost Valley anymore, she said softly, just the path that led us home. His lips found hers as the last light faded from the western sky, stars emerging one by one to witness a story centuries old, yet ever new, of boundaries crossed, of courage rewarded, of love transcending every barrier placed before it.